Hello, everybody, and welcome to the holiday edition of Read and Talk About Gemology. My name is Justin K. Prim, and I'm going to be one of the co hosts for today's talk. So, we are not in our normal position. Normally, we are broadcasting to you guys from Bangkok. Today, we are on the island of Koh Tao in the south of Thailand. We are in a hotel. So, who knows what's going to happen? We might have some surprises, whether that be strange internet connections or loud boats or who knows. But so bear with us because we're not in our normal comfort zones. But we are definitely going to have a good talk today. As you know already, we are going to be speaking with John Koivula, and we are very excited about that, as I think you guys are too. We had the biggest registration that we've had probably in maybe 6 months. So we know that you guys are still out there and still interested in hearing some of these legendary figures tell us their stories and tell us the stories behind the publications that that we know and love. So in this series, this is now our fourth month, fourth good month, and we've got many more months to come. So we're super excited to be here with you guys, and super excited to talk to John. So Vincent, if you are here and ready, pop on in, and we can see what we're going to say. Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
So
How you doing?
I'm good. I can I can almost see you in the next bungalow over there. So yeah, Vincent and I are
Yeah.
on vacation together here in Koh Tao, doing some
Yeah.
diving, and you can kind of see a little bit in the background of Vincent's. It's pretty tropical over here.
Nice. Nice. Great.
Yeah.
Great place. And great place to have an incredible Christmas gift with John coming to discuss with us about his very inspiring work on inclusion in gemstones.
So what's the story? How did you get to know John in the first place?
Well, I think that like many people, I met John through his work because 20 years ago there was no internet yet. There was not all these photographs on Facebook, on Instagram, inclusion photograph. So actually, my first meeting with inclusion photography was when I went to study in Myanmar. The friend who helped me to organize that told me that I had to come with some reference book. And I went to GIA in Thailand, to the school in Thailand, and he told me to get some instruments. So I went there, and then I asked the people at GA in Thailand some advice regarding, some reference book about inclusion in gemstone. And they told me that the best reference was that book. That was the most expensive of all the books, in the shop. So I look at it and I say, "Are you really sure that it's a little bit expensive?" They say, "Vincent, it will be the best investment you will do." And some of my friend in town told me, "Yeah, yeah, get that book. That will be great." So I bought the book, and then I went to Myanmar for 4 months with my Darfy loop on the other book, like Gem Identification Made Easy from Antoinette Matlins that we welcome last month, and also, of course, Ruby and Sapphire. That was the first book I ever bought about gemstone and inclusion. And from Richard Hughes, that will be our guest next month. So I had the photo atlas with me, and for 4 months I was checking around the stone from my friend in Myanmar, and I was trying to match what could see in the stone with the photo atlas, and starting to collect actually a stone that had interesting inclusion thanks to the photo atlas. So my first thing was that book was a wonder for me because it was like a game. I was looking at stone and I was trying to get some stone with better inclusion than in the photo atlas. And I started actually my reference collection because of the photo atlas. So
Mm.
that was great, and I still have about 1,500 small sapphires, spinel, garnet that I collected during my studies in Myanmar because of the photo atlas and my time enjoying studying inclusion gemstones thanks to the photo atlas. So of course later I joined GIA in 2008, and I went to Tucson, And no, that was in 2006 when I went to Tucson for the first time. Richard Hughes organized a dinner with John Koivula and his wife. So I had the pleasure to have at my table my two basically bookmasters, the two people who put me really in corundum, Richard Hughes with Ruby and Sapphire on John Koivula, and I was like in heaven. I was listening their stories, and I was like a kid, it was great.
It's good. Good
And then
story.
I worked with John at GIA. It was great. So we
So
are super happy and proud
yeah,
to bring John to everybody tonight. Yes, it's a
yeah,
privilege.
me
I'm
too.
very
Me
happy about
too.
that.
So well, I guess we should bring him in then and let him tell his story for us. So John, if you're
Yeah.
ready, unmute and yep, perfect. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm unmuted now, I believe,
You are
Yeah.
loud and
and
clear.
ready to talk a little bit, I guess.
Yes.
Uh, I have been fortunate throughout my life, actually, to have uh, doing a professional career along my hobby.
Mm.
So I would be doing this even if I wasn't being paid for it. In other words, it's like getting up in the morning and knowing that you're going to be able to look at gems and minerals and do gemology is a real treat. I mean, it's nothing short of a blessing, and I think that a lot of people out there feel the same way that get involved with gemology, that they really just have a passion for it, one particular area. Sometimes people will drill down on one particular aspect of it. And that's what happened with me with inclusions. I was always interested in small things with uh, anything in nature. We didn't have a TV for the longest time, and our parents would just send us outside, say, go outside and play. And that was the opportunity to take a magnifying glass and chase ants around with it, or just collect rocks down by the railroad tracks, that kind of thing. So it was just a lot of fun that started my passion. My father was responsible to a great degree on which way I headed, because he was a mining engineer,
Oh,
and he would take us to over to Montana, across the Idaho Panhandle and into Montana every summer for his land assessment that he had to do. He had claims over there, copper claims, and he would sit there and go, and he had to do a certain amount of improvement work every year on the claims in order to keep them up. And so he'd take us over there as like a family vacation, and I get to crawl around on the mine dumps and collect the blue, the green azure, the green malachite, the blue azurite, chrysocolla. It was just laying all over the dumps, just chunks of it. And so I would sit there and collect these pieces, put them in the car basically, and he'd go through and make sure that I wasn't taking too much weight in the car, because he had his own equipment that he put in the vehicle, and everything had to get in. But he let me take a certain amount of material with me. And so I started a rock collection early on. And it was that with my father and these assessment trips. And then also just going down along the railroad tracks, because the trains would come through and they'd have like sulfur and quartz and things like that on board. And the sulfur allowed me to burn it and make, and with a cold source, you had a cold source and you had your sulfur going, you could actually precipitate silver crystals on the up on the cold section of the container you had it in, and the crystals would grow off, and then you'd have these beautiful sulfur crystals that you made out of bulk sulfur. So it was kind of fun to do. And the other thing that I would do is I'd raise money for my hobby, and by going and putting in the extra material that I didn't want in a wagon and going around in the neighborhood and selling it. People sell the pieces to the people, then they would sit there and look through, and I think they probably felt more sorry for me than anything else, because they'd sit there and give me 50 cents and pick something out. So I made a lot of friends that way, and it was just a good kickoff. I wasn't interested in inclusions at that particular point in time. I got a little bit more sophisticated as I grew older, and minerals were the focus. But what I didn't notice about the minerals was that I was actually starting to collect inclusions, but it didn't really dawn on me that that's what I was doing until I self-collected a little pyrite or a little quartz crystal near North Bend, in the Cascade Range, and outside of Seattle, and it had a perfect little pyrite crystal inside of it, and that sparkly golden colored pyrite just inside of trapped in that colorless quartz just immediately intrigued me, and I thought that this was one of the most wonderful things and magical things I'd ever seen. And then, so I looked at that and examined it with my hand lens and just became completely enthralled with that. So I started looking at all the other minerals that I had, everything else that I'd collected, to see what was inside of them. And I found a bubble inside of quartz. And I thought that was quite fascinating, but it was the pyrite in the quartz that got me going on the life path that I was in. And I didn't really know about gemology at that time. It was just me and minerals. And the gemology came along at a later time when I'd been collecting for a while, and I was going out with my wife back in 1970, about 1970, when her mother said that I should go and see this one jeweler that she always went to get work done. And the jeweler had his own collection of rocks and things like that, and she thought I might be interested in it. So I went into this man's shop, and there was nobody upstairs. He had a few jewelry display cases with finished jewelry in it, but also with mineral specimens stuck in there. And I recognized some of the mineral specimens as being like from Idaho or from Montana, places like that. In Kellogg in Idaho, he had pyromorphites and things like that sitting in his case, and along with the jewelry, and it was very nicely displayed. And when I came in, though, a buzzer sounded, and he came up the stairs. He was working down below, and I found out that he was a master cutter. One of his strengths was he was also a jewelry maker. He made jewelry, cast the gold, and carved the things, and cut his own stones. He cut Montana sapphires, amethyst from Pikes Peak, amethyst from Mica Peak, and then other materials he'd buy at gem and mineral shows. And he cut these stones and put them in his case and make jewelry around them. So he was like a one-man operation doing everything. I started talking to him, and he started talking to me, and I told him why I'd come in to see him and that sort of thing. And we talked for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden he just says to me, would you like something to drink, like a Coke or something like that? And I said, sure. And he said, well, I'll be back. He says, I go to get myself a cup of coffee. He said, hold the fort down while I go out. And he left the store, went across the street into a deli that was across the street, and came back with his coffee and with the Coke. But he left me in there for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes all by myself with all these stones around. And I asked him later on what made him do that, and he says, I can always tell when I'm dealing with someone honest. So we hit it off right away, and he and we became friends until he passed away about a little over a year ago. He passed away at the age of 87. So but he got me going on gemology. And one of the things that he showed me when I went downstairs into his work area was he had a whole little gem lab set up, and I had never seen a refractometer or a polariscope or any of those basic gemological instruments, a spectroscope. I'd never seen one before, set up the way those were set up. And he started talking to me about them. And he said, "Have you heard of gemology?" And I said, "No, I hadn't heard of gemology." And he said, "Well, all the minerals that I've been taking in there and showing him, when I brought in my collection with me, I brought in part of it to show him when I first broke the ice." But he said just about everything that I was showing him was a gemstone, was considered a gem material. And he said, "You should study the gem materials as gems." He said, "because that's what you've been collecting that have your inclusions in them." He said, "are these gem materials." And so I took him up on that and started learning from him. But he told me about the GIA and about the British Association. And so GEMA and GIA were the two that he told me about. And so I started taking the courses by correspondence. I signed up for both courses and started pursuing those in my spare time. And I was then at this point in time, I was 18 years old, and I was a freshman in college, and I had picked my majors. I was an early bird on what I wanted to study because I knew what I wanted to study, and it was inorganic chemistry and geology. And so I went about going, because in the quarter system, which is what this university was under, Eastern Washington University, it was under the quarter system. And what that meant was that you had 180 credits to graduate with a bachelor's degree. And there was 60 hours in your major, 60 hours in general college requirements, the ones that you had to take. And then there was a free 60 hours, which added up to 180 hours. Well, the free 60 hours was like, well, what am I going to do with this? I can obviously study my other major because I had two of them that I wanted to do. So boiled down to then in 4 years' time, the 4 years that it took me to get out of the university, I came out with two separate bachelor's degrees, one in chemistry and one in geology. So that worked out really well as a ground, as a foundation for my gemology, I thought. And it really did. It was a lot of fun. I started seeing the relations of chemistry, all the chromophores and so forth that you'd see that were coloring rubies and emeralds and things like that, sapphires of different colors, spinels. All these chromophores were chemistry. There was like a solid solution, sort of a chemistry going on there in some of these things. And some of it made me think beyond the basics of what I had been thinking of before. It brought out the nature of the gem materials to me and connected me with them in a way that I would probably have not have been connected to before. But I just really fell in love with it. And so I was working at the time for a company called Cominco American, which was a mining company. And I was doing field exploration for them and running their core room, where we would take the drill cores. We had certain sites that we were drilling on properties to make them, assess them and see if we wanted to spend a lot of money on building a pilot plant and starting to process some of the ore to see what we could get out of it. But the first step was a drill program. And so when we would drill these holes, I would sit there and lay the cores out when they came out in a box so that they ran sort of like a snake through there. And there were 3 foot sections in the boxes. The boxes were 3 feet long by about 1.5 feet wide. and they had sections in them, and you'd put these drill cores in there and line them up so that you knew exactly what depth they came from and what there was there. One of the exciting things that we came across, and it was too bad that it was so deep, we never traced it again, but we hit it a little over 2,000 feet in the Cascade Range. We hit a gold vein. And so this core came out with a vein of gold running diagonally through it, all the way through it. And that disappeared into the corporate heads got a hold of that. And I don't know where it is today, but it was a beautiful specimen. It really was very interesting. But so I got an early start, from the age of 5 on in minerals and dealing with gems and so forth. And it was just a very happy time, and I really enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed it every day since. I can turn around here and I can go to the microscope, and I've got all sorts of crystals and things that I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is a chunk of opal that I got.
Maybe go a little higher.
Cannot see.
Yeah, there we
now
go.
we can. Oh, about the opal.
That's from Queensland in Australia.
Yeah. About the opal. Nice.
Yeah.
So you had actually the kind of perfect background for gemology, because most of the time people ask me whether it's better to study geology or to study chemistry in order to go for gemology. And most of the time I say, well, maybe both will be best, but I don't know too many people who study both, but actually you did. So that's
yes. Well, it's worked out for me, actually. There's some of it I never use anymore. I mean, but then there's the other aspects of it, understanding country of origin of gems and minerals and things like that, that the chemistry plays right into that, and so does the geology.
Correct.
So maybe go for it, Vincent.
No. I say the fascinating thing is, so your love for minerals, when you find that in a gem with this small pyrite crystal, turn your interest for inclusion. While on my side is just discovering your book, because for most people who study gemology, we go in a school, and the stone in gemology school are not really great. But when you have the book next to you, you see, oh, you can see that in gems. Oh, that sounds to be interesting. And then when you go in stone, you start to dig in order to find something that is as beautiful as the photograph you have in your book. So on my side, it's really your book. And I think I'm not the only one. There are many people who, get a very strong interest in inclusion because of your book, because of the work you did in order to communicate this love for mineral inclusion, which is great. That's really inspiring.
Yeah, and it's helped me in my career. I mean, like I said, being doing this as a hobby, I was actually able to, I got hired by GIA, and all the way back in 1976, and I've been working, doing my hobby ever since. And that's what I did in the early years.
How did you start at GIA?
What?
How did you start at GIA?
How did I start at GIA? I was working for the mining company, and then I got married, and Christy and I were just beginning to set up our home. So I took a job with a jewelry company, with a jewelry store, to find out what that was like, to see where I could use my gemology in the jewelry field. But I found out I wasn't much of a salesman. I was very poor at sales. I talked to people too much, and get them involved in the gems as natural objects. and not as a thing of necessarily of beauty, but just as where it came from out of the ground and that kind of stuff. Like an emerald, I bore them with tails of Columbia and three-phase inclusions and that sort of thing. But when I was working in the jewelry store, I figured out I wasn't a salesman and I wasn't going to be successful at that. So I got my resume together and I sent out resumes to all these different places and all these mining companies and so forth. I actually got a job offer from Goldfields of South Africa Limited, and one of the reasons I turned it down was they wanted me in Rhodesia, and to be out in the field, but while I was in the field, I was supposed to carry a 45 caliber semi-automatic handgun with me at all times. Now, I've done exploration in the United States, and we never had to have semi-automatic weapons on us to do the work. So I was kind of leery about what was going on. And that would have been right up Vincent's exploration. He likes to go into dangerous places. So that would have been right up Vincent's alley, I think.
Yeah, but I never carry a gun. I don't like to go and explore anywhere where you have to carry a gun. I prefer other people to carry a gun. But I don't like to carry a gun when I go to the field. It's no.
But you go to places where you probably could carry a gun.
Yeah, but number one, I'm not allowed because I'm a foreigner. So usually foreigners are not really allowed. And then, since my childhood, I grew up in a family where, we were hunting and things like that. So I'm used with gun. But the issue with gun is when you start to carry a gun, you behave because of the gun. When you don't carry a gun, you think differently and you solve the problem differently. That's the problem with gun. When you have a gun, you solve the problem because of the gun. So the gun becomes part of the problem. When you don't have a gun, you find another way to get out from the trouble. And I found that when I go to the field, it's much better not to have a gun on me. So I think better and I solve problem in a better way. That's the way.
Well, that makes sense to me. I didn't like it either, the idea that they were requiring you to carry a gun with you. So I turned that job down.
Yeah.
But then I also got a letter back from GIA because GIA offered they had a placement bureau in there at the GIA, and you could send in your information to them and they would see if they could find a job for you. They'd help you find a job. So I sent my resume into them as well. And I got a letter back about a week and a half later. I got a letter back saying they wanted to hire me. So that's how I got to GIA. And that was in 1976. And so Christy and I, we packed up our U-Haul trailer and hitched it up behind the car and away we went to California. And I'd never seen a palm tree before. And I remember starting to see palm trees and they looked so prehistoric. They really did. I mean, I'd seen lots of the kinds of movies where they had dinosaurs, living and they had the palm trees around and that kind of stuff. And it looked like a jungle. And I was fascinated by the palm trees. I remember that. But so I went to work for GIA and never really looked back. GIA has been a wonderful company to work for. I think it's afforded me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had. And getting paid like I said, getting paid to do your hobby is what's better than that, really,
Dream come true.
I agree. What was your first position at GIA?
What was that, Vincent?
What was your first position at GIA? How did you start it? Where did you start it?
Oh, my first position at GIA, it was kind of funny because Mr. Liticote wanted me to work in the lab under Chuck Fryer. And so I got to GIA when I was supposed to, and I went to the front desk and said, introduced myself to the woman that was behind the desk, and I told her that I was there because I'm supposed to start work at GIA in the laboratory, and that Mr. Liddicoat had hired me. And so she said, just a minute, and she made a phone call into the laboratory, and I'm sitting there waiting, and about 2 minutes later, Chuck Fryer comes out, and he's very, he's a taskmaster. He's a stern taskmaster. So, excuse me, he comes out and says, yes, what can I do for you? And I told him, I said, Mr. Liddicoat hired me to work in the lab, and so I'm here to this was supposed to be my first day. And Chuck Fryer looked at me and he said, well, that's news to me. And he said, just a minute, I'll be back. And so he took the elevator up to the second floor of the building and went back to see Mr. Liddicoat. Mr. Liddicoat told him, you know, yes, that's the way it is, that I was supposed to start work. So he comes down and he tells me, okay, follow me. And he got me a place to sit. And so from that point on, for the next few years, I sat there at the microscope and identified gems and X-rayed pearls, and whatever they threw my way, I did. So it was fun. And I became really good friends with Chuck Fryer and Bob Crowningshield, both of them over the years. And I met a lot of people for the first time. Like we had Tom Moses, he worked in the lab. When I was working there, he came in and he worked in the lab for a period of time. And we got to know each other really well then. And I don't know, it's just been a really interesting time. And you get to see, I didn't look at it as work. I looked at it as the very next job that you were given was another mystery to solve. You know, it was the next one might be a red stone that you poured out on your desk. And what is it? Is it a spinel? Is it a ruby? Is it synthetic? Is it a piece of glass? You don't know. you have to test it to find out.
Yeah, every 30 minutes something new come up. That's something I like when you work in a lab. If you do 20 stone a day, you have 20 stories in your day and 20 encounter with some kind of mystery. And within 20 minutes, half an hour, you have to solve that mystery, which is challenging sometimes, but it's great when you feel, okay, well, you know, today was interesting. I saw something nice. Yeah.
So then,
and that's where I met Dr. Gubelin too, was for the first time was in the lab.
Okay, I was just going to ask that.
Yeah, no, I met Dr. Gubelin for the first time in the laboratory, but we've been corresponding for a long time. I sent him when I got my wisdom teeth pulled out. I was in pain and I had all the stitches in my mouth. I got 4 wisdom teeth pulled out at one time. And that was when I'd ordered a book of Edward Gubelin's Internal World of Gemstones, Documents from Space and Time. And that book arrived while I was laid up in bed, and I opened it up, that beautiful color book. I opened it up and started looking at it, and I couldn't put it down. I just wanted to read the whole thing. So I ended up reading the whole book, laying there in bed. And I knew I wanted to meet Dr. Gubelin. I knew that because he had done what I hadn't done with inclusions. He'd taken pictures of them and put them into a book format. And that's what spurred me on to work on the first Photoatlas, was the fact that I'd seen this beautiful book and I read this beautiful book. And so what I did was I started trying to take photomicrographs with really crude equipment. And I got pictures, but they weren't good at all. They were terrible. But I sent him a group of pictures that I'd taken in an envelope, and along with a letter, and introduced myself, and I sent it to him, and he very kindly critiqued my photos, which wasn't very which didn't come out to a very good. They weren't very good, and he critiqued them as being not very good. But that critique made me want to get better and do a proper job of taking photomicrographs. So one of the things that I used in my hobby with microcrystals and minerals was fiber optic light, and I used these ones that I call pinpoint illuminators. They have little fiber optic bundle, and then you put these little things that would go down to less than about a millimeter in diameter, and you could stick these right up onto a crystal or onto a gem or onto anything that would light up the interior completely. So I introduced, basically, I was the one that could be traced back. I was the one that introduced fiber optics to gemology. And it took off like crazy as soon as I did it and started using it in the laboratory. Other people wanted to see what I was doing, and I showed them things that they couldn't see with without fiber optics, what they could see with it. And so they adopted it immediately in GIA, and I wrote an article about its usefulness and so forth, and published it with a picture of my fiber optic unit, which was made by a company called Dolan Jenner. And that's all pictured in this article that was published in Gems and Gemology back in, I think, 1980 or 81, I can't remember. And so that's how basically taking good photomicrographs and sending them to Dr. Gubelin, we would correspond back and forth and send photos to each other. Well, he wrote me and told me that he'd heard, because I told some people, he heard that I was wanting to do a book on inclusions. And I told him, yes, I said, I've got a manuscript and I have some images, quite a few images now. I said, but I don't have a publisher. I said, I can't, because I offered it to GIA, the first Photoatlas, Volume 1, was offered to GIA to publish, but they had already agreed to publish a book called Diamonds from Birth to Eternity by a guy named A.N. Wilson. And so that, they didn't have any more funds available for publishing a book. So when Dr. Gubelin said he had a publisher, but he didn't have a manuscript or anything at this point in time, and he said if we both published books on inclusions, he said they would compete with each other. Why don't we work together and publish the book together? So there's just one book that comes out. And he said, then with your photos and my photos, he said we would have a much more robust presentation. And I, not having a publisher, not knowing anything about really much about the publishing world, I jumped at the chance. And so I had never met Dr. Gubelin, never seen him before, other than pictures. And then he came to visit GIA, and he was with Mr. Liddicoat. Mr. Liddicoat was taking him all around, and he brought him into the lab, and he wanted us to meet Dr. Gubelin. And so Dr. Gubelin asked if I was there, and I, went over and shook his hand and stuff. And he said to Mr. Liddicoat, he said, John and I are doing a book together. What do you think, Dick? And Mr. Liddicoat said, that sounds great. And so I got the blessing of the GIA at that time. And so the book came out. We sent. It was a long process doing a book. I mean, Dick Hughes would tell you what it's like to do a book. But doing a book, I mean, these 3 volumes incorporate about somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. I can't remember the exact number. Somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 photographs. And then the captions with them, and then the supporting text and so forth. it was kind of in a way a nightmare to go through and to put together the photo atlases, but it was a real labor of love, and it was an exercise in patience. I'll tell you that, because we would sit there and need to correspond with each other. This was before the computer and before the internet and texting and sending emails and that kind of thing. This was before all of that. The first manuscript my wife typed up, the first book's manuscript was typed up by my wife on her IBM, I think we had an IBM Selectric typewriter, and I would proof the thing over and then catch any typos and that kind of stuff and then flag those. And she'd go back in and put whiteout on there and then fold it back in again into the machine and type the correct way that the thing was supposed to be spelled or make the correction. And then I'd send it off to Dr. Gubelin. All this would go off to Dr. Gubelin, and he would look through it and see if he found anything else that needed to be done. And if he did, then it came back and would go through another editorial change. And it took a long, long time to do the first book. The second and third volumes were fast compared to the first one. But no, and when Dr. Gubelin came into the lab and we shook hands and stuff, we became really good friends over the course of doing the book. It was, his friendship was one that I really valued. I valued his friendship greatly. He was a gentleman of the old school. He was a gentleman.
And at this time, all the photos were argentic, so you had to actually work with film and develop the photograph. It was not like easy,
exactly.
Like digital now.
Exactly, that's right. It was all slides, 35 millimeter slides. And that's the same thing with volume 2 and 3. They're all 35 millimeter slides. They got scanned in at the publishers, but they were presented as 35 millimeter slides. And then the publisher would scan them in and make the digital file for the books. But
that's so much more work than it would have been today. Like if you do a volume 4, it's going to be so much easier for you than having to do developing slides, scanning them. That's a real effort right there.
And hoping that they came out. That was the thing. You know, you'd sit there and you'd find the picture that you wanted in the microscope, and you'd sit there and you'd take that picture, and then you'd have to roll the film back up once you got 36 exposures in there, and you'd send it off to the developer, and then just hope that just hope that I'm going to use some of the magic juice.
Apple juice is good.
That's what. Anyway,
how you did the mineral identification at this time? You were not using Raman. You were looking by color, by shape, trying to recognize the crystal. How do you recognize identify crystal inclusion at this time?
Right. Yeah. Here's the way it was done. And I'll tell you. The first way it was done was through small sacrifices. You take it would depend on who owned the stone too. You know, I mean, I've been collecting the thing since I was a kid, so I've got about 2,400 or 2,500 specimens that are mine that have inclusions in them. And those have been identified, but the way that they were done was the first time you encountered an inclusion, you try to get answers from that as you can. If it's a stone that you can afford and that you can buy. Boy, I'm having a problem. If a stone that you can afford to buy and sacrifice, then you can, I warned you guys about this.
Sorry for that.
But anyway, you will grind the stone down to the surface to where you can reach it at the surface, and then take a micro scraping of it,
Mm-hmm.
put it on a glass spindle, glue it to a glass spindle with a glue called Vistanex, put it in a device shear powder camera, run an X-ray diffraction pattern on it, and then match the pattern up by the strongest lines and where they're positioned in the X-ray pattern, and then you search that in the database for X-ray patterns, and come out with what it is. So you do it that way, and that was a destructive way of doing it. But once you did that with that one, then the next time you saw an inclusion that was similar to that, you could sit there and say that it's probably
The same.
that probably is the same. So that's the way it was done to begin with, was that way. You could also, if you could get enough little particles or enough chips off of the inclusion, you could also do Becky line testing with your Cargill liquids, the little immersion liquids, and you could find out if the thing was doubly refractive, singly refractive, and what its refractive index was, generally quite accurately. So there was a lot of little tricks to do on the inclusions before you could say what they were. But like I said, once you identified, like for instance, in the spinels where you have the apatite crystals with the little black belly buttons on them, you know when you see those now in the spinels from Mogok that they're apatite crystals. You know that those are apatite crystals.
Yep.
So you can.
But so that shows the amount of challenge that there was before. Number one, the film, so it takes time. Number one, to take the photo and see the result, and then identify the inclusions and write the caption. So just to do all these photographs and then exchanging between you and Dr. Gubelin by mail, waiting a few days to receive each other contribution. It took you how many years of work to build this volume number one? How many years?
Well, he had a number of images already, and I had a number of images already, and so we just exchanged those one time and had to wait a couple of weeks, to get those. So those were only exchanged one time. It was the ones that we needed to take, and the ones that we're still taking the pictures.
Yeah,
that was the time. That was what took a lot of time and a lot of patience. You just had to have patience. You couldn't hurry it.
And so that first volume came out in 1986, but then you guys didn't do another one for what, maybe 20 years or so. How did you guys get back into that rhythm or whatever of communicating and starting to work on new?
That was my fault. Dr. Gubelin was satisfied with basically what he'd done already with the first volume of the Photoatlas and with his internal world of gemstones. He was satisfied. But I kept bugging him about it. I kept saying, there's so much more material out here. We got treatments, we've got new synthetics are out, and we need to, there's an update that's needed. And I said, besides that, we have, because we were still exchanging slides. I said, besides that, just the slides we're exchanging and the images we're exchanging with each other, those need to be published as well. Some of those, I said, we got more than enough for a book. And so he finally agreed that we would do it. And so we contacted the publisher again. The publisher got on board, and it grew though to immense proportions. Dr. Gubelin passed away in 2004, but between now and that time, we had amassed a manuscript like this big, it's like this thick, and it was like, no way is that going to be in one volume.
No.
So we had to figure out how are we going to divide this big manuscript into two manuscripts. Where are we going to make the division? And now that I think about it again, and I can think back on it, I think we probably should have gone with 4 volumes because volume 2 is almost too big to even handle.
It's huge.
No,
and there was no corundum inside. I was disappointed when I saw volume 2. I was so amazed with corundum, so interested in corundum. I opened volume 2. Oh, there is no corundum. It's in volume 3. Oh, I have to wait more.
There was a few corundums in there.
Yeah, a little bit, but not much.
Not much, I know.
Yeah. No, it was huge.
And so then you guys were able to figure out a good way to split into volume 2 and volume 3. Did they come out at the same time, or was there some publishing time between those?
There was a delay between them. Volume 2 came out in 2005, and volume 3 came out in 2008. So there was a few years in between, and I was adding images up until the very last minute that I could add images.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was just continuing to add to it until the publisher said no more. So then I still don't know what I'm going to do with all these images that I have. I have binders full of 35 millimeter inclusion photos that I'm having to go through now. One of the projects I'm working on is I'm going through all those images that have never been published and some that have been published, and basically weeding out the ones that I don't want anymore, the ones that are, in my opinion, are substandard, and just making a collection of really high quality images that I will then scan into the computer using a Nikon scanner.
So now you guys. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Vincent. Well, I was just going to say, so now, today there's 3 volumes, the original one from '86, and then the volume 2, volume 3. And as far as I know, they're still being published. They're still available, right?
Yes, they're still available. They're available through GIA or British Association.
Yeah. So yeah, because I know in London you can get them at the GMA at the school, and I think in Carlsbad the same, right?
Right. You can get them there, and I'm not sure who else. I think that there's a couple other venues that sell them too, but I'm not sure.
Bangkok. I got mine at GIA Bangkok. I got them in Bangkok at the GIA in Bangkok.
Yeah, I know that some regular bookstores sell them too. I mean, there must be a distributor for the publisher, because I bought mine in Antwerp in just one of the gym jewelry tool stores. So people do have them, but I think if people want to order them, do you think the best way is either through GIA or GMA, depending on what continent you're on?
Right, I think so.
Because I think now, well, someone just said in the comments on Amazon, the books are ridiculously expensive. So if you can just pay the real price, if you buy them through GIA or GMA, you don't have to buy the crazy collector Amazon price.
Right. Yeah, I've seen some prices that are ridiculous.
Yeah.
I've seen some prices that are so high that.
So are you still working analog, or have you succumbed to the digital revolution with your photography now?
I'm still working with slides, but I am succumbing to the digital world.
Yeah.
One thing the digital world has done that I think is fantastic is it's made a lot of people out there into photomicrographers that wouldn't have been otherwise.
Mm.
You don't have the cost of the film. You don't have the cost of the developing. Right there, you're in a hole of about $30. Just for those two things, film and developing is going to cost, because you use professional films, and those are more expensive than the regular films. And but because so many people out there now are taking photomicrographs, and you start to see more in what's out there in the world of inclusions. No matter how much I'd like to, I can't see every inclusion that comes down the pike, every gem that has nice inclusions in it. But somebody else may see that, and they take a picture of it and share the picture. And then there's the I guess they call them the 3 microtiers. They call them. It's Nathan Renfro, Billy Hughes, and I'm trying to remember the other guy's name. Danny Sanchez. Yeah. Danny Sanchez. Yeah, those guys. They're taking the art of photomicrography into a new level altogether. Their photos are beautiful, and they've adapted completely to the digital format.
Yeah.
And they're using the stacking software that is so useful at times. Now, I think sometimes things get overstacked, but it brings out a 3-dimensionality to the inclusions that are really special. So, but I'm all for the digital world. I think that it's going to be nothing but it'll be improving all the time,
and so for you, oh, sorry, go ahead, Vincent.
No. That was fine.
I was just going to say, if you've already done some work with digital, and you've obviously done tons and tons of work with analog film, for you, is there any quality difference between the two, or is it just sort of approach?
It's getting better all the time. Digital now is, I'd say, as good as the finest films. And I think that digital has a way to go yet. I think it's going to come out and be the best thing yet in just a short period of time.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about the digital world is that you can do these micro movies. You can do movies of inclusions actually doing things.
Yeah.
Bubbles disappearing. Nathan just took a film, made a film out of a diamond in my collection that has a cavity in it, a cubo-octahedral shaped cavity with green radiation stains on the inside of the cavity. And then inside of that is a green diamond octahedron that rattles around.
Oh, okay.
And he took actually pictures, registered pictures digitally, showing the movement of the octahedral crystal that's too big to get out. It can't get out of the cavity. It has to stay there and roll around inside. But he took this beautiful film of it. So you sit there and you watch the film, and you're sitting there looking at this thing bouncing around inside of this cavity. And that wouldn't have been possible without the digital world and the digital formatting and so forth. So no, I'm all for it with these young. I really enjoy seeing what these young people come up with. Danny Sanchez is wholly into opals, and some of the shots of his opal worlds that he creates are really special.
I think digital is, as you say, it's really putting a lot of people into, because there is one thing watching, for example, your book, but then with digital, I really started to enjoy when I had my Nikon Coolpix 4005. So I was super happy with my first photograph. But then, later when you look at the photo and you see all the grain and the quality, you say, okay, I need to upgrade. And then you try to do them again. But many people now are just starting taking photo just with an iPhone. And then they will upgrade, and then they will upgrade, and they will do the photograph again and again, trying to raise to a quality level that is suitable for them. But the great thing about digital is whatever the budget you have, you can enjoy. And then when you have a better budget, you upgrade. And my advice to these people is, try to buy the stone. Because if you own the stone, if you have the stone, you will be able to take again the photograph later, when you will have
Right.
better equipment. So the key point is to be able to get the stone in order to have a reference collection. Because with your reference collection, if instrumentation upgrade, you can collect data again. And this is where your book was, oh, my camera is not so good now. I need to buy the stone because maybe later I will be able to take a better photo. And that was possible because of digital. Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
and I know. Well, sorry.
I,
Go ahead, John.
I agree. I agree with you, Vincent. It's really nice. It's bordering on being important to be able to get the subject of your photos if you can afford it, and it's available to be able to buy the stone with the inclusion in it is and have that as a master is really useful.
And so, John, I know this has come up already in my Q&A, and also in people have already emailed me this question several times about your gear. But maybe before we get into the gear, you've sent me some favorite photos. So shall we show a few photos before we talk about how you took them or how you take them?
Sure.
Okay, so let me
We
just
can.
pop up the PowerPoint. And also, Antoinette Matlins had asked, do you have any favorites? So are these photos representing some favorites, or do you have other favorites that we're not going to see today?
I have a lot of favorites. Mostly my two favorite gemstones are, and I'll give you the reason why, but my two favorite gemstones are quartz and diamond. And the reason is that they cover the entire geological spectrum
Okay.
that we as gemologists can ever expose ourselves to. And
I see.
anyway, this one right here is a shot of a diamond with the trigons on the surface. And this was taken by Nomarski differential interference contrast. So this isn't this type of microscope here. This is a different microscope. It has Nomarski capabilities. Next one.
Okay.
Another diamond. Like I said, diamonds are a favorite. This one shows a orange eclogenic garnet. So this tells you that this diamond came from an eclogite, which is one of the two types of rock that basically produce, or geological environments that basically produce diamonds. Next.
And so when you're taking these, well, before I switch real quick, can we ask about the lighting real quick? Because I know the lighting is a crucial element for how these photos come out so well. So is this with fiber optic?
Fiber optic, totally fiber optic.
Okay. And then we can see sort of, I think, the sort of shadow of the facets down here, right? This is coming out of a faceted stone. Okay, cool.
Right, this is a faceted stone. Another diamond, and this.
So this is an octahedral, another diamond octahedral in the middle, right?
Right. This is a phantom, basically shows a phantom cloud, hydrogen cloud, and it's a fiber optic brought in from 4 different directions because these little particles are directional. And if you shoot it in from one side, you'll illuminate part of it, but not the other part. So you have to shoot it in from 4 different directions. So there was 4 optic bundles going in 4 different directions on this one to get that way.
And this is one of the great things with fiber optics is that with fiber optics you can see particle in gemstone, and fiber optic became really a great tool for people working in lab because in many cases particles provide a lot of information in ruby, sapphire, like synthetics or natural. Without fiber optics, it's very, very difficult to see, to be able to observe particles. So that fiber optics really rule the particle in gemstone. It's great.
And so what are the particles? It's what are they? Do we know
They're
what are they made out of?
they're tiny little voids,
Yeah.
just
Yes,
decorating the edges of a phantom crystal.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay,
This is one of the iridescent androdite garnets from Mexico.
Mhm.
And this is just showing this a single fiber optic light is brought in, and it just illuminates the granular, not granular, but the acicular structure of this.
That's probably my favorite type of inclusion, or this inclusion where you feel that you have an opal inside your gem. You have all these colors and these geometric patterns that when you look at the stone, maybe it's blue, and then you look inside and you have all these colors. You have a totally different world, and it's I just love this. This is great. Looks like a
yeah.
painting.
It would be easy to think that we're looking at an opal right now, which is kind of incredible. Okay, so let's
That's
see
what.
what do we have next. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
This one is a combination of three things. It's rhombohedrons of a carbonate,
Mhm.
probably calcite, a
Mhm.
rutile needle going through all the way up to here. So rutile needles going through and then it entering along the rutile needle, along the meniscus between the rutile needle and the host quartz. Petroleum leaked in, and it filled in all the little edges of the crystals where they were slightly separated from the quartz host.
Oh.
And so when you put ultraviolet light on there, long wave ultraviolet light, the oil glows, and that's what you're seeing here. It's a shot with using
So
ultraviolet light.
so all these white outlines, this is petroleum in the gap between the inclusion and the host.
Yes.
Wow,
Mm.
so cool. Okay, what do we got here?
This is a chessboard. I think these look like chessmen. What they are is hematite concretions that started to grow at the point where the little points are on the chessmen.
Mhm.
They started to grow and continued to develop downward until the quartz quit growing for a period of time and a little cap formed over the end, and then the whole thing was swallowed up. But this is again fiber optic illumination, and that's
Okay.
that's the only thing that was done here was fiber optics.
Very cool.
Now this is the material they call pink fire quartz. It's covalite, really small covalite bundles. Covalite's a copper mineral, and when it's in transmitted light, it's green, these thin flakes, and in reflected light, they're kind of a hot pink color. And so this is.
I think we have we have both, right? So we can see
both of them. There they are. So this is by transmitted light here. This is by a strong transmitted light, and then the other one is a dark field, or not a dark field, a fiber optic wand coming in from above to reflect on these all the little platelets in there.
Yep.
Mm.
Like
And then so what are the platelets?
The platelets, they're covalite, mineral covalite.
Oh, okay, yeah, you said that. Okay. So what are we looking at
This
here?
is a Montana sapphire. This is also Novarski interference contrast. differential interference contrast, and you have this is where the lamellar twin planes reach the surface, and they're etched downward to create this sort of grid-like pattern on the surface of the sapphire crystal. So this is a corundum, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, with etching.
This one's really cool looking.
Yeah.
This is fluorite from the
Yeah.
front, and a technique called Reinberg illumination was used on this as a combination of a shadowed Reinberg illumination coming in from below and fiber optic illumination creating the whitish areas and the gray areas on this. And this is the surface again of a fluorite crystal from England, and it's very has a very mountainous, or like a pyramid sort of a structure to it, like maybe an ancient village or something, an ancient civilization.
Like but the composition is great. You have a great sense for composition, I have to say. This is maybe something why your book was so attractive to me at the beginning. Composition.
Well, I'll give you one little secret, is that in my going through and doing inclusion photomicrography, I rarely will shoot a subject that I don't think is going to give a good photo. And that came from using film, because in film, every time you push that lever, there's money coming out of your pocket. And so I was very picky about what I would shoot for on film, and that's just carried over to the digital age. So I just don't want to waste the money and the time, basically, that a poor subject will create for you. So you pick out a good subject, you find a nice inclusion, and you know when you're looking at a nice inclusion, you know there's the magic of it. It just sits there and screams at you, take a picture of me. And you're drawn into that world, and you just know that the picture is going to be worth doing. Oh, anyway.
So in this picture, like obviously for us as the viewer, we can see that you've spent a lot of time setting it up, the composition, the lighting. Obviously it's an incredible photo. But once you find that inclusion, you're looking in the microscope, you're turning the stone around, you found this scene. But then how long does it take you to figure out or play around with the lighting to get such a great composition with, the darks on one side, the lights on the other? It seems easy from our point of view, but does this take a long time?
Sometimes it just pops in, but that's a rarity. It takes a lot of time to sit there and work around. You got to get everything clean. You got to get the surface prepared just right. Then you have to get it so that it's, well, with stacking, it's a little bit, you can fudge around with having it parallel. But you want to have make it as horizontal to the you want to make the thing as horizontal to the surface of the microscope stage as possible, so that it gets into a. You just lost something there.
Can you? We still see you. Okay.
Can you see the image?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see.
And so, like for this picture, because you're using all analog, so I'm not totally sure about this question, but I know in the world of digital, we can do stacking, so we can get a really huge depth of field that you couldn't maybe otherwise do. But in a picture like this, where everything's so in focus, how does that work in a film camera?
Oh, I'm having trouble with my computer here. I don't know what's wrong.
Oh, maybe you've switched out of Zoom, so maybe you can.
No,
Let me try and I'll turn the PowerPoint off and turn it back on. Maybe that will just pop it in for you. Any help?
No, that didn't do it.
Oh. What do you see?
I see something that says Zoom cloud meeting, Zoom leave meeting, cancel. I want to cancel that.
Yeah, I
There
think
I am.
cancel.
I'm back.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what happened though.
That's okay. So
This is
anyway,
only this is only my second Zoom meeting that I've ever done. So
You're
well,
doing
we
good.
appreciate you doing it with us. So
yeah, I've
anyway,
been nervous the whole time because I don't want to screw it up.
that's okay. We can always
Well,
edit this for the YouTube. No
Zoom
one will ever
sometimes
know.
it's a little bit with Zoom. Sometimes it's a little bit like with inclusion photograph. You have to be patient. With patient, everything is solved. You know, you set up your thing, and then with patience, if there is any trouble, with patience, everything will be solved.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So anyway, what I was wondering was, when you're doing a photo like this, where it looks like everything's completely in focus, how do you do that with an analog camera? Because I know in digital we can do stacking and get a really wide depth of field. How do you do that with film?
How do I do stacking with film?
Or I don't know if you're doing stacking, or this is just the camera setting is giving you such a big depth of field, but I just didn't know because I've never played too much with it with film.
Yeah, no, I'm not. There's no stacking here. This was just a uh, single shot where
Okay.
I focused on the center of the pyramids. Basically, I was focusing like halfway down the pyramids, and that picked up the bottom layer and also picked up the top. So it was
Okay.
just a delicate balance, but there's no stacking involved there.
For
So then,
for for, for most photo like that, Justin, you have to deal with the magnification. The lower the magnification, the higher will be the depth of field. So if you
mhm,
don't go too much in magnification, you will have a depth of field that will be much
yeah,
larger than if you are going very high magnification, then you have a very, very shallow depth of field. So
yeah,
some inclusion like that with, if you work at a low magnification, you can see nearly the whole stone in focus.
yeah. Well, I just didn't know. It's sometimes hard to tell how zoomed in we are, but
Yeah.
I know sometimes it's, you really have to play with the f-stop and everything to get the depth of field where you need it to be. So I didn't know if there were some other tricks or it's just good camera work. I guess it's good camera work.
That's why now, in photography with inclusion, most of people add as information, the field of view. So they want to provide you the information about how large is a screen that the image you
Hmm.
are able to see. If it's 1 millimeter, 0.5 millimeter, or 2 millimeters, then you can get
Hmm.
an idea about the magnification and the actual size of the object. Yeah.
Yeah,
Correct.
cool. Okay, so let's see what else we got here.
Oh, that was
Now,
the cover.
this is the cover of the Photoatlas Volume 3,
Yeah.
and these are little garnets. There's some little garnets in here and little rutiles. So we got garnets. This garnet is reflecting, so it's really just one garnet. There's another smaller garnet out there,
Mm.
and another little one right up here. So there's just a few garnets and some rutile prisms in there. And this was an East African uh, Umba
Sapphire.
Sapphire, and I own it. I'm happy to say it's
Mm.
one of my reference specimens. So
I
I just
always
thought it was pretty.
I always really appreciate the types of photos that when they come out, you see the inclusion like it's floating in space, but then you can still see the facets behind it to give you a little bit of context to kind of tell you, yes, we are inside of a stone, not, sort of floating in space, and also kind of how big is it? Because you can see how huge the facets are compared to how tiny they are in real life. So I always think it's so cool when you can see the facets and the inclusion as well, and it's so clean around everything. It's so, it's not a bunch of stuff. It's just these two focal points. It's really cool.
Yeah, you have to get the subject very, very clean. Now in Photoshop, you
Yeah.
can take Photoshop and just remove all the dust after the fact if you want to. But when you're using film, you want to get as much of the dirt off as you can and make it as clean as possible.
So for the
So that,
photos that are in the books, are they untouched as far as cleaning them up in Photoshop, or I mean, at least
right,
for the wow, okay. So all manual
right,
cleaning.
right. It's all manual. There was no photoshopping used in any of the 3 books.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, let's see.
Mm.
This is a discovery that I made that I thought was really neat, and it's a colorless grossular from East Africa, and the stringers in there that you see, the colorful stringers, there's a calcite, and they
Oh,
look just like a fingerprint inclusion. It looks like a fingerprint inclusion, so it makes me think that the calcite at one time was liquid and was flowing through and then crystallized and became a solid into the grossular. But the grossular is colorless, and the calcite is colorless unless you use polarized light on it, which is what was used here.
Very cool and so colorful. And so these colors are coming from the way that it's lit, right? I mean, in certain lighting types, you won't see the blue on yellow. Does that have a lot to do with how you've lit the photo or the stone?
Which one?
I mean, the just getting that blue on top of the yellow. Do you only see that with certain lighting, or you saw that right away?
Yeah, right. It's polarized light. That's the only way you'll see that.
Okay. And then I think we have just a one or two more.
mm.
Another Vincent will guess what this one is. It's another corundum, another sapphire.
Yeah. Again, twinning and
Right,
trigon as a surface.
right.
Look like
It's no differential interference contrast.
yeah, like it. I like symmetry. I like symmetrical shape and yeah, it's great for composition. And then the colors here are playing super well with it. So it's etching structure, which is very nice on the surface. Yeah, from what I see.
So when you do this one, so basically this is in between what, two filters that's giving you this type of view.
Basically, what happens is that there's a parallel path of the light that comes out of the nose piece, basically,
Mhm.
and hits the subject, and any contours throw it off parallel, throw parts of the light beam off parallel, and they recombine in the field of, in the microscope. And when they recombine, there's, because they're now off parallel or off sequence to each other, they create color.
Okay, interesting. And so, for instance, on this one, if you just took the same stone in the same view from, you know, with no filters at all or nothing but just looking at the stone, what do you miss out in this one? What does that add?
Oh, you would just see, it would just look gray.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so none of the color and texture. Okay.
Right, none of the colors. Yeah, it's just gray. It's a false color image is what it is.
So then when you're looking, let's say whenever you found this inclusion or you were looking at this stone, how do you decide like, oh, I need to go check it out in this other microscope with this other filter? Is that just your own
Just,
experience?
yeah, it's just a feeling that you get that it's going to give you something neat.
Okay, that's
If
cool.
you want to try as many different lighting techniques as you can try, because you don't know what you're missing, and that something will be revealed when you try a different lighting technique. Like if you use polarized light and then use a fiber optic light and those kinds of things, you just are playing around and seeing what the subject will give you.
Yeah. I love the idea that, you know, over time, you know, whether you're talking about photography or anything, but it's really cool to think that, you know, over so many years of taking these photos, now you have sort of a, let's say, a sixth sense about when the stone has a secret that needs something special to reveal it. So we didn't ever mention this, but what year did you start taking, or let's say not necessarily taking the photos, but just start really focusing on inclusions in the microscope? That was after you started at GIA?
I started, no, I started actually focusing on inclusions in the microscope at about the age of 12 when I
Because
found
you
that
already had a
pyrite.
microscope. You already had a microscope at
Yeah,
that time.
Mm.
and I it just blossomed from there. But it really got going when I met my friend Leon Agee, and he's the one who told me about the GIA and the British Association, and it explained to me what gemology was, and that's when it really got going full speed ahead.
And so when did you first have access to a microscope that had a trinocular with the camera?
What was that first? Well, I did the old camera body hanging off of the eyepiece.
Mhm.
Like so
That
many of
worked
us
pretty
have.
good. Yeah, it wasn't that great, but my trinocular time started about, I guess, when I was about 19 years old.
Okay.
Wow.
So
So let's just do a little math. How many years have you been taking microscope or photomicrographs?
photomicrographs,
Yes.
probably, God, I'm going to age myself here.
Okay, we
At
don't mind.
least 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so do you think, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but for all the people who are going to watch this, who aspire to also take such incredible photos, how long do you think it actually takes to develop that sort of sensitivity to kind of have an idea that you could change the lighting a little bit or change the filter a little bit and find something stunning that you maybe didn't see in the first view?
The time
Well,
for the book,
you can there's
please.
a couple of articles that were written. The
Yeah.
first one was written by me back in published back in like 2001 or something like that, and published in Gems and Gemology. And the second one was done by Nathan Renfro, and that was on digital photomicrography for the gemologist. And that was done, and Nathan would be able to tell you, but that was done maybe about 4 years ago. And both of those articles are available free on GI's website, because you can get Gems and Gemology free, a digital, from Nathan Renfro, summer of 2015. Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah.
Nathan must be online. Summer of 2015 would be his. I don't know when mine came out, but both of those articles combine to let you get a good look at how to light something. Illumination is the most important thing you can do, and how to light something, and then what you can expect. But I would say to people just starting out, play with your lights. When you get the thing in the microscope, play with the lights. Move it around, play with it, get the fiber optic light underneath it and around it on the top and so forth, and make your microscope into a magnifying polariscope with some Polaroid filters. Just play around and see what the subject offers.
Okay. Good advice.
That was
Okay.
one of the best aspects in the Photo Atlas volume number 1 is that you have the photo of the inclusion, but you have also a chapter about lighting where you have the drawing of the microscope. This is dark field, this is bright field, this is shadowing and things like that. And that chapter was very, very useful to me at the beginning, because when you start to have a microscope and then you have the book and you have under every photograph the type of lights that you were using. So at the beginning, just when you discover the book and you read the photo atlas, if you have a microscope next to you on gemstone, within a few minutes or few hours, the time you go through the book, you start to get experience. And this is basically this book, the photo atlas, are a condensate of great experience from John. And this is, I think, this is what motivated many young people to start playing with. Just few hours with your book next to a microscope. Yeah,
Well, thank you for that, Vincent.
yeah, that's true.
And so I think now maybe we should spend a little bit of time with gear, because I know a lot of people have asked this. Some people in the chat have asked it. I've gotten 2 emails about
There is
the
one more
gear.
photo. There is
Oh
one
yeah,
more photo. That's probably my favorite. That's why I'm bothering you.
okay.
No, there is another one, but it's okay.
Okay, there's
I
two.
like that.
There's two. Okay,
Yeah,
there's
there are
two.
2 more photos. Yes.
This is a thin film in a ruby from Thailand.
Yeah.
And it's a fiber optic illumination.
That's probably my favorite inclusion in Ruby. Thin film in rubies are, it's just, you have small opals inside a ruby, it was so cool to me the first time I saw that in your book. It took me years to see that, actually, the gemstone, because I was in Burma. There was no Thai ruby in Burma when I was studying, but I had that in the book. It took me nearly 1 year to find one, and I was so happy about it. Yeah. And that's probably
And
my
this
favorite.
thin
Yeah.
film in a sapphire. We're getting Vincent's coronet here.
This one
Yeah,
is.
that's probably my favorite. I love that.
It looks like a piece of digital art. It's like pixelated and
Correct.
colorful and crazy. It's a really cool photo. So what are we seeing?
Fiber optic.
Fiber optic? Okay.
Yeah, fiber optic. And this was running. This was oriented primarily parallel to the optic axis direction, because you have these square zones where it's healed. You have it looks square rather than hexagonal. If you were looking down on it, and you had hexagonal holes in it and hexagonal features, you could sit there and say that it was perpendicular to the optic axis. But this is running parallel to it, and that's why you have the square sort of edges, 90-degree bends and those things.
It's not common. It's not common, that direction. Not common at all.
I know.
This is and with yellow area right in the middle, like a tree going through the sky, on the side of a cliff. This is one of my favorite photographs. I love this type of photograph. This is really super beautiful. And the healing process of the fracture. When you think about the process, about natural healing, within the fraction, the time it takes, and the beautiful interference color is just, it's beautiful. Yeah, probably my favorite.
Okay. So that was a very nice journey through some of your, let's say, favorites, some of the favorites. So the gear, how did you do it? We've seen what you can do. Obviously, you have 3 incredible volumes of incredible photos. The question everybody wants to know is, how did you take them?
Well, this right here, this is one of the fiber optic lights.
So
And
this
you
is
can't get, and you can't go wrong with, let's see, let me put that back. And this is just a simple, this is a film canister. When film used to come in these things, you can't get these anymore, but film used to come in these cans.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do with them, and now Nathan Renfro does it too, and I don't know if Billy Hughes has done it or not, but what you can do with them is you can take the lids and punch holes in them like this, and you can cut them in different ways with a razor knife, and you can put them on your fiber optic illuminator to create diffused light, which really helps in lighting thin films. So just all sorts of little gadgets. This, let's see if I can take this apart here.
You're getting the behind the scenes views here, which is pretty cool. Oh yeah, Billy said she is using those as well. She's also
She uses them too.
Yeah, she's in the chat as well too. So
anyway, this is where the camera goes here. Just right here in this. Let's see.
okay.
This.
So then basically, instead of having a camera lens, you have an adapter that snaps into the microscope, the third viewport.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So then basically you can use any SLR camera, or any camera, yeah.
Correct. Any camera. And this microscope head is very, very nice because it's ergonomic. I know that from doing this for 50 years plus, for me, there'll be times when I would be working for hours at a time and not even realizing it. And all of a sudden I get these pounding headaches, and all of a sudden my shoulders start to burn and the back of my neck starts to burn. And but with this microscope, you can, it has an ergonomic feature so you can look straight in on it and you can be sitting back.
Yeah.
And that's why I like this. This is a Nikon SMZ 800N. And it works beautifully. It's a fantastic microscope. All of my equipment that I've used in the past has been Nikon. Nathan, I think, has a Canon. I think Nathan has a Canon camera that he uses.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of people had asked about the fiber optic lights. So when you're using the fiber optic, is there different wavelengths? Is there different colors, or fiber optic is only one color light?
Well, you can. It's got a little rheostat, little knob that you can turn up and down to make it different. Let's see, where is it? Let's see if that's in there.
Yeah, okay. I think when you put it in, yeah, okay, so you can adjust the brightness.
Yeah.
But then it's pretty much it's white. It's not cold or hot. It's a neutral.
Right. It's white. It's pretty much a white light.
And then Rod Knowles had asked, when you first were using fiber optics, because you said you kind of introduced them inside of GIA, when you first had that first fiber optic unit, where did you get that, or what was it for?
It was for micromineralogy. It was to be used to explore, like you get a big chunk of a rock type called a gossan, has little tiny crystals growing inside of the bugs and the little openings. And you sit there with a fiber optic wand with the little pinpoint illuminators on there. And it illuminates them, so you can sit there and look through your microscope at what would be a shadowed area or a dark area, a dark cave, and you can put the light in there, and then you see the splendor of the crystals growing in from the sides and stuff. So it was used. I used it for inclusions, and I used it for micro minerals. Like I got a little little box here with a little crystal in there that's a deep green. I don't know if you can see the green color, but it. I can tell you how I started using them in gemology. I was already doing that, but when I went to work at GIA, they had a old style, old school fiber optic unit. It looked like a sort of like a trash can, small trash can, and out of the top was a single wand coming out. And I saw that it was just sitting in the back on a table, and I when I saw it and nobody was using it or anything, so I took it over by my microscope and I was using it. And all of a sudden, Chuck Fryer came up to me and he told me, he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking at the stones." And he said, "Well, we don't use that light for anything except for looking for stones if we dropped them on the floor." He said, "We use it because that's what that light's used for." And I didn't say anything. I just put it back. And then there was a ruby that came in a couple days later. A ruby came in, and nobody could find anything in it. And so they asked me to look at it just to see what a stone looks like that you can't find anything in. And over the lunch break, I took the fiber optic because nobody else was in the lab. I took the fiber optic unit and I set it up I played around with the stone, and in one direction, a myriad of little particles were visible. And it was a Kashan synthetic ruby, and they called this stuff rain whenever you saw it inside of the Kashans. And so I left it set up and in my microscope, and all I would have to do to show it to somebody is to turn on the fiber optic light. And so they came back from lunch and he saw that thing there again next to me. He says, "I thought I told you to put that light back." And I said, I was looking at this ruby that you gave me that was flawless. And I said, it's not hardly flawless at all. And so he came over and looked, and it was like, and I said, "And a watch." And I had the dark field on, and I turned the fiber optic off while he was looking, and the inclusions disappeared. I turned it back on again, and there they were. And I said, "They call that stuff rain." And I said, "This is a Kashan synthetic." And from then on, they wanted to get fiber optic lights, and that's what they started to do with buying from Dolan Jenner, because that's where mine came from.
So you had to be a little bit of a rebel to get that going.
Yeah, well, I knew the usefulness of it. I would have never done it if I didn't know the usefulness of it. It would just sat there. But I'd used it before and had a lot of luck looking at little crystals and gems and things, so it was just, it was there, and it was asking to be used is what it amounted to. So that's
Vincent, you're muted.
Yes. I say all these stones with particle and forcing. When I studied gemology at the beginning in Burma, or even we had no fiber optic, but when I discovered fiber optic, it makes life, much easier when you are a lab gemologist and you're working with stone, because you can see so many other things that you could not see without fiber optics. It's great.
Well, the other thing to travel with is a dark field loop.
Yeah. And with the dark field loop, you can use the torch, that people are using
like a fiber optic
as a kind of fiber optic, because they have this small thing, to look at ruby. So you put the dark field loop and you use your torch next door, and you can basically have a kind of fiber optic. Yeah. Now, dark field loop is my favorite instrument in the field, because it's like you're carrying a microscope with you, and anywhere you go, you can have a dark field loop, so you can keep your skills up to date. And as long as you're okay with techniques,
So,
Yep.
John, just to round out the gear talk. So just to sum it up, I guess. So you have your microscope set up. You have your camera in there. You've got your stone, positioned. You found your inclusion. You've played with your lighting. So it could be fiber optic. It could be transmitted. It could be dark field. It could be several types of lighting. Is that it? Then you take the photo, or is there any other tips or tricks in there that need to be said?
I always take the photo when I think I've got a reasonable photo to look at. In other words, if I'm happy with what I'm seeing, I'll take the picture, because if I try to get any more out of it, maybe you'll lose it and then I can't get it back again. And that's happened to me where I had the perfect picture set up and I thought, well, I can just get a little bit more. I'll move it a little bit, and then I'll move the light a little bit, and I'll play around with it a little bit more, and I'll get it even better. And all of a sudden, it isn't there anymore, and I can't get it back. An hour later, I still am not able to illuminate it the way I had it that one time. So I always say to people, take the picture when you like it. When you think it looks good, take it. The worst that you're going to have in digital is just a digital file that you can dump later if you don't want it. You're not gonna, it's not like it's gonna cost you $5 to shoot the thing,
Yeah.
So, but I think that applies, that because time is a critical factor. It's one of the things that we can't ever get enough of. It's time. It's the thing that runs out on us. And so if you can, if you set up and you take your shot, you take your photomicrograph, then you can play around with it a little bit more. Once you get the picture that looks nice, then you can sit there and say, well, what else can I do? Where else can I move the lights or position the stone and see something else that it might offer?
And so how long does it usually take to set up and to I don't mean the gear, but I mean to set up the photo, find the inclusion, find the lighting, and then actually get the picture? Is it a few minutes or sometimes it takes a long time?
Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes, and the more you study the specimen, the more the more time you're going to put in on it, because the photos because you'll start to see opportunity in the stone. You'll start to see that this looks like a good shot, and take that one. And then if you get a better one, you don't need that one anymore.
Yeah. And so you said before you've always been using Nikon microscopes. Are you using Nikon camera as well, or
Yeah.
do you? Okay, so I'm just trying to think about the questions that people have asked about gear and trying to think if there's any other gear related. Do you have any recommendations for if people are want to get a home setup? Obviously, what you have maybe is out of financial range for most of us hobbyists, but is there a
You
good
shop
recommendation for
the,
beginners?
I would say shop the internet for you're you're better off buying a used microscope with really good optics than you are buying a brand new microscope with poor optics. In other words, if you've got $3,000 to spend, I would sit there and shop that on the internet and check out all the places that are selling used microscopes. Nathan Renfro just bought about a year and a half ago, a Zeiss photomicroscope, and with all the Zeiss lensing and so forth. He had to go out on the internet and find a few parts and everything, but he's completely rebuilt the thing, repainted it and everything, and it looks fantastic. It's and I'm not sure how much he's got into it now, but he's probably only got $2,000 or $3,000 maybe at the most into this, and he's looking at an instrument that is a $70,000 microscope.
Wow.
So, there's bargains to be had out there, and I would sit there and say, at least look on the internet to see
Okay.
what you can find.
No, that's
That
a great
reminds me
tip.
what John Emmett was saying about some because when you are in the US, especially in California or in this area where you have a lot of tech companies, sometimes they are changing their equipment and things like that, and there, yeah, you have some good opportunities. Probably better than if you are set off, somewhere in Madagascar, for example. Yeah, but in the US, yeah, I guess you can get some pretty good deals sometimes if you are patient. Again, it's a question of patience.
Yes.
Yeah, Nathan had just put into the chat that he spent about $1,600 in his plus time searching and rebuilding. So yeah, quite a deal. If you're saying compared to 70,000 or whatever, that's a great tip. And then what about the camera? I mean, is there a bad choice for the camera if you're using a professional camera, or are they all somewhat equal?
They're all somewhat equal. The can't as long as it's a good as long as it's a good digital camera,
Hmm.
you're set.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we've thoroughly covered gear, and obviously you can go on about specific microscopes all day, but maybe people can just do their own googling about that. So let's last couple questions from me. What are you working on now? Obviously, you have three incredible books and articles under your belt. What's going on these days?
Well, we work on I'd invite anybody that wants to do any work on inclusions and wants to maybe get their inclusion photos um, published. They can write up something if they come across an interesting specimen that has a nice inclusion in it, and they get a good photograph of the inclusion, and they want to write up a little 100-word description of it. We've got a place for that in G&G. It's called the Micro World, and it's a new column, relatively new. It's been on for a couple of years now, but we're always looking for information to put into that column, and so that's one of the things I work with. Nathan Renfro and I are both working on a couple of book ideas. One of them is purely for the aesthetics of inclusions, just no other reason than the aesthetics. Show the beauty of them, and of course, in that book there will be a description, so you could use it to match an inclusion you might be looking at with something similar. But the idea behind that book is just strictly beauty, the fantasy of inclusions.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
And then the other book that we're doing is years ago, back in 1980, I want to say 1988, I think it was. I started doing a column for the Canadian Gemologist, a regular column called the Photolexicon of Inclusion-Related Terms. And what it did was when I would read through the literature and would come across a term that would fit into that category of had an inclusion relationship in there, I would put it in a book, in a master list, and then write a description of it. And then that became this column where I would sit there and I would, starting with the A and going towards Z, I would sit there and write the terms out, write a description of what the term was, and then use a photomicrograph to illustrate what the term was telling you. In other words, illustrate. So it became like a dictionary of inclusion, dictionary of inclusions. And I got up to the letter M before the Canadian gemologists went under. They had some problems with the government or something. And I don't know why the government messes with stuff when they, anyway, that's another subject, but they, the magazine went down and they never published it again. But
But that,
want to try to start over from M and build this into a book, finally get to Z. And so that's another thing that Nathan and I are working on is this photo lexicon.
yeah, which is basically what you see. The Photoatlas Volume 1 was for me the photo lexicon. Every time I wanted to describe an inclusion when I was working, in a lab at AIGS or at Gubelin or at GIA, I learned, how to describe inclusion just with the photo atlas next to me. When there was an inclusion I had to describe on my worksheet, I said, how does John put that? So I opened the photo atlas and I look. I say, okay, when this inclusion, John calls that this way. And then I use that. So that was so important. This is, I think, one of the most important things about the photo atlas for the generation who learned gemology in the 1990s and 2000 is we learn how to describe inclusion the way you and Dr. Gubelin set up the thing with the Photoatlas Volume 1. So this is the ultimate kind of reference book about, okay, this we call that way. Why? Because in the Photoatlas, it becomes that way. And then gemologists, from number one gemologist to number two, they can understand, worksheet from the neighbor because of that, because we all use the same lexicon, which is the Photo Atlas Volume 1. And this is where somewhere the thing which is really fascinating with inclusion is that we say usually gemology is something that combines, so many different things from history to trade to art to science and things like that. But it's even more true with the photo atlas and with inclusion because you have the aesthetic beauty of the inclusion, but then you're wondering why there is this inclusion in this stone. How come it happened like that? So it brings also a lot of questions and many things to discover. So it's really bringing inclusion in gemstone can bring many different type of human knowledge together. And the greatest thing for many young gemologists is that when we cannot afford, you work in a lab and you see great stone that you will never be able to afford, sapphire from Kashmir, ruby from Burma, and things like that, rubies. But one thing you can afford is you take your camera, you put on your microscope, you take a graph, and then you have a memory. And you have been able to do something that you will be able to keep forever about the beauty of the stone that you had a privilege to watch. And be able to do that, John, thank you. Thank you for all this thing because this is thanks to you that I was able to enjoy all these years, and every time I was able to see a great inclusion, I took the photo and I started because I found your book. So that's why I say that your book is probably the best investment I ever did. Even if it was costly at the beginning, I was wondering, should I put all this money in this book? After all these years, I say, yeah, put the money. If you have some money to put in one book, put it in the photo atlas and then enjoy.
Well, thank you very much, Vincent.
Yeah. Please do some more with Nathan. Yeah, good idea. You are doing a good team together. Nathan has a great mind for artistic and also science. So great combination. Keep doing. We enjoy.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
You can follow Nathan is putting a lot of super nice inclusion, on Instagram, on his
Instagram, I know.
account. He's excellent. He's excellent, just excellent. I enjoy every day. It's great.
And so then
Others are doing that. You have many followers.
Yeah. So we can expect to have at least 2 more books out of you, John. Then you've committed to it now because you said it on camera.
Yeah, I don't know if there'll ever be a volume 4 of the Photo Atlas.
That's okay. We have other things to look forward to. So Okay, well, we're pretty much at 2 hours, and I know, John, you told us in our our practice the other day that you were only going to give us 45 minutes because your voice was going to go out. So I just have to thank you so much for all the time. I know so many people had emailed us and signed up more than we ever get. So I just want to say thanks, and thanks for 2 hours and the behind the scenes and the good stories. I think we just captured some important information, at least about the fiber optics and GIA. I never heard that story, and I never knew about that. So I think that was really a good one to hear. And of course, how to do the photographs and seeing how you've done some of yours is it's very, very inspirational. So thank you so much for the time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And so, for anybody watching or in the future watching, John has kindly let us publish his email. So, if anybody wants to email John with questions about anything, I guess, about gear or about photos, or just to say how much you love his books, that you can do it there. And also, he's said microworldofgems.com is, if you want to find out more information, you can go there. And of course, as we said already, if you want to buy the books, Gem A or GIA is probably the best place to order because the prices are correct. Um, yeah, so thank you, and thanks Vincent for the time during the holiday. I know you're having a busy diving schedule, and you're laying on the beach a lot, so we.
Well, no, I'm not laying on the beach a lot. I'm allergic to sun. But, as a John say, we get this privilege to have basically our hobby and our work is about the same. So gemology is one of my favorite hobby, and if I'm not working, I enjoy to do a little bit of work. But I don't really call that work. I call that a passion. And being able to make a living from your passion is just it's great, and it's a privilege. Honestly, when I travel around the world and I meet a lot of people, I really feel that I should not complain. I'm a kind of a very privileged guy, and I agree with that. I know that, and that's why I don't like complainers. Probably, I
Yeah,
don't complain about that. I'm
yeah,
super happy, and I don't know who to thank, but thanks God or thanks my parents and thanks mentors and people I meet along the way who basically this crowd of passionate people that are making gemology a very interesting profession.
yeah. People like John, inspirational mentors, can't get enough of them. And like next month, Richard Hughes, we're going to keep on going with inspirational mentors.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably the guy who is responsible for because the first book I ever bought about gemstone was Ruby and Sapphire by Richard Hughes. That's why I call Richard my book father. And it's discovering Ruby and Sapphire that I realized that gemology was a connection of everything I like. And later, about 2 years later, I decided to go to study gemology.
Yeah,
And when I decided to go to study gemology, I had already the Ruby and Sapphire. Then I was advised. I had the Walter Schumann book. Yeah, the book written by the person that John. Did you ever met Walter Schumann?
No. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I did one time.
Really?
the only
You're the
person we've
first
met.
person I met who told me that he met Walter Schumann.
One time
Really?
I met him at, I'm trying to remember. It was with Herman Bonk
Okay.
in Edar.
Okay. Wow.
Interesting.
You're the
So
first person. I ask this question regularly. I asked to Dietmar. I asked to my German friends, and nobody was able to tell me that they ever met Walter Schumann. He's probably the guy who sold the most book about gemstone. Okay,
yeah,
so I had the book from Walter Schumann, and then I was advised to buy the Photoatlas on gem identification made easy. So, and these with these four books, I started to study gemology. So,
yeah,
last but not the least, the next month will be Richard Hughes,
yeah,
which enabled me to spend the last basically nearly 25 years enjoying path of half my life, actually, because I'm a bit less 50. Half my life through gemology. I have to own that probably to the day I discovered ruby and sapphire. So, first talk of 2021
Yeah.
will be with Richard.
And so, if anybody hasn't gotten their fill of talking about books and thinking about gemology books, I also just want to give a plug. I just posted a video yesterday on YouTube called The Gem Cutters Library, where I talk about John Koivula's book. I talk about Richard Hughes' books. I give some stories behind them. So if you guys are still awake and not done, I'll just post a link in the chat, or you can just go on YouTube and find it. But there's plenty more webinars to come. I know Vincent and I have a schedule for 2021. I've got my own schedule for the gem cutting talks for 2021. So it's definitely not over, and we're just really getting into it. The guests we have lined up are even more and more and more exciting. So yeah, we're going to have fun next year. So okay, well, thank you again, John, and happy holidays. And hopefully we'll be meeting up sometime in real life once all this crazy stuff's over. Maybe in Carlsbad one day, or who knows where. But fingers crossed.
Right.
Keep doing.